Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at a really interesting large project here. You can see a lot of books. This is Scott Finch's Introverts Illustrated. This is a conceptual continuation of two of Scott's previous projects. The Domesticated Afterlife, which is a more narrative piece that has a lot of classic symbolism built into it, a lot of mythological symbolism and things like that, basically dealing with archetypal ideas. And then Scott's Travel Diary, which is very much more personal buildup of symbolic imagery and a little bit less narrative. This is more like a, I don't know, fused state of his travels. And in this one, Scott developed this interesting cut and paste collage technique where he repeats images over and over. And when I've done reviews of both of these books and also talked to Scott. We've done an interview, so check out all of those things. But in talking to Scott, with this paste up technique that he has, we were talking about the idea of like developing a personal symbol system versus like the more public symbol systems, and how do you bring those two together. And it seems like Scott is trying to push that further with Introverts Illustrated, taking some of the like more public symbolism and then using his cut and paste technique to really delve into his own language, which is like the Introverts Illustrated aspect of it. So when you're looking at these books, there's a lot of repeat imagery that have been, like this little piece you can see has been cut out and it's probably used somewhere else in the book. So it's a really dense, like here you can see this little figure repeats. It's a really dense, deep dive into one person's head. But in this one, Scott's trying to bridge the gap a little bit more between that public and the personal symbolism. So it's a really hard project to go through and talk about the whole thing, talk about the whole book. There'd be a lot of like going back and forth and seeing how this symbol shows up in this book. And you could really unpack this kind of infinitely, I think, which is to its benefit. Also a little bit to its detriment. Like it could be a barrier to some people. The barrier to get in, the price of entry is like a lot of attention being paid. And so that could put a lot of people off, I think. But for me, it's like this very rich, rewarding experience that I could return to over and over. So the best I can do, like to review it, is just point out some of the things I really enjoyed, put my little sticky notes, give you a sense of how the whole thing's put together too. So it comes in, it's 5 or 6 different parts. Let's see, they've got a list in the back here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different parts. And they have anywhere between 3 to 5 books per piece. So the first part is Witch Dreams. The second part is Lost and Found, then Title Amphibian, Retreat, and Look. And then each one of those have a subtitle. So this is the first part, the Witch Dreams. We have Rapunzel's Dream, The Prick. This is House of Sleep. So you can see that there's like thematics throughout. The Tea Party. And then within each one of those, they kind of have a slightly different approach. They're all pretty poetic books. This one stood out to me, tapped into the public symbolism that I've been dealing with a lot lately. Anyone who's followed the channel and read Strange Death knows I have a relationship with the thought complex of Circe, thanks to working on Strange Death with Dave. So in this book, when they talk about the name of the island is Aia, I immediately am paying attention, and there's a lot of Circe symbolism in here, and also some symbolism at the end that corresponds with Hecate, who would be Circe's mother, and like a related goddess. So when Tori was looking at this, she said, oh, either this person really has a close relationship to Circe and Hecate, or they're just haunting his dreams and he doesn't know it. So this one was particularly interesting. And that's where I'm saying, like, there's enough of this like standard, like if you know mythology and stuff, you can grab onto different things in the book. Like lots of different things are making appearances in here. And then other books, if you're not so familiar with the symbolism that's being used, it may feel a little more opaque to you. Also, I think Scott's developing enough of his own symbolism that you got to learn his language a bit. There's a lot of really cool visuals all the way throughout. I mean, obviously this cut and paste collage thing is its own aesthetic that's very compelling. Allows for a different approach, a more poetic approach in both the writing and the imagery. But there's some transformational images like this that I really, really love. You can see that a lot of this stuff is something that Scott's probably done like he's done it on notebook paper, but probably in a meeting or something, and then tapping into those subconscious doodle states, taking that, scanning it, leveraging it in something. It has that freshness of like a freestyle or straight to ink sketch to it, and just some really beautiful images like that. So this one is Pastoral Dream. Then we switch on to the next segment. The next segment is the Found and Lost. This is called A Cricket. And I don't really need to flip through each one of them. The visual aesthetic is pretty similar throughout. This is Where's Your Head? Tarshish Dream. So we got another dream one, actually. Come Back. You can see there's some alien abduction in this one. And this one's called Dear Left Hand. In this one, there's a suggestion that Scott's doing a lot of these drawings with his left hand in an attempt to access that subconscious state a little bit more. I think this one's a little more autobiographical too. He's talking about no thought of the tedious work you make for the scissor hand. So talking about like using that scissor hand to cut and paste, I think. This one's very much more about his process, I believe. There's liberation and surrender, and you tell me nothing else would suffice. That just surrender to the process. So very cool one that's kind of a little bit more of a peek into his process. Then we move on to Tidal Amphibian, with King of Waters being the first one. I really like this page here, just both visually and then the writing that's in it. I think this gets across another example of really getting across what Scott's going for in the language here. He says, this is not a story, this is a state. I like that. I'm not telling you stories. This isn't the domesticated afterlife. This is a state of thinking, and that's really what he's trying to develop, as far as I can tell, is a new way of thinking in images. And I find that very appealing. Me and Scott are going to start writing. I've already started, actually. I got these right here. Based on some stuff that's in the conversation me and Scott had. I'm starting to do a comic that I'm going to send to him, and then we're going to share comics back and forth as like a pen pal exchange. So I look forward to like stealing some of his techniques and trying to talk to him and seeing how we could develop a language together, how much I could pick up on his language. Parable of the Gulf. This is number 12 of the series. I really, really like this image here. This image, to me at least, speaks to the idea of the interconnectedness of nature. I've been reading a lot about mycelium and fungi and stuff lately in preparation for some stories that I want to do, and this has that whole interconnected system. This looks like mycelium and plants here, and then there's the rain and the clouds and the birds eating the seeds and pooping them, and some little diagram here. I feel like this book is talking about the interconnected nature of nature and the beauty of nature, but I could be wrong. That's my interpretation of it. After You Lose. Some more writing that I really like in here. Don't lose yourself out there. Don't get drawn into the outrage. And I'm taking this as like talking about the times that we're in here. Just notice this nice symbolic relationship. So this is the kind of stuff that Scott's doing that's really interesting, is what I call poetics of form, just putting two things next to each other that have poetic resonance, or like, using the same shape somewhere else on the page so that there's a rhyme between the imagery. But like right here, having the ladle and the bucket with the little loop. There's a lot of stuff like that. So I like the message though. Don't lose yourself out there. Don't get drawn into the outrage. Stay grounded in good work so it won't uproot you. That idea of like, hey, you can get drawn into the outrage and contribute to the negativity, or you can stay grounded in doing good work and don't be uprooted. And connecting that to plants, I think, is cool too. Then you get to see some of the imagery that he's been using throughout, separated in this one, like the big drawings. Be simple, unadorned, and true. And I think he's purposely being like, here's the original simple drawings, bloom in secret. That idea of like, hey, the artwork is there for you first, and then you can share it with someone else. I think is kind of part of what he's talking about here. Do that personal work first. So there's a lot of wisdom packed into these. And like I said, the more time that I spend with these, and the more you start to see those interrelationships between the images. And then the images between the books, I haven't even tried that, like how much of these images cross over. This is a very rich project. Here's another little piece of writing that I really like, that again speaks to the times we're in. Outside, they carved us from the stone. Divided and conquered and chose teams. I crawled. Number 17 is called Vanishing Song. Number 18 is Errant X. 19 is I Tell Them. And with I Tell Them, we enter into the last section. I think I actually got these mixed up. Yeah, I got 13 and 14 out of place here. So we got Turtle and One Survives. I'll have to put those back in order. And then we end with 20 and 21, Crooked House and Draftsman Exam. I really like this page in Crooked House where Scott starts using like a vellum for his tracings, so he's able to compose almost on a y-axis as well, use transparency as one of the kind of formal factors that he's playing with. That seems like a new development later in the series, and I quite like it, and it lets you see a little bit more of how he's working, where like he'll cut and paste this and then draw next to it. I find some of his like composition techniques mysterious too, because he blends together the collage with the new drawings pretty well. You could sit there and search the page for the gaps where he's cut, but yeah, it's a technique that fascinates me, and I kind of want to try it. It's like automatic composing. Collaging with your own ideas is a pretty fascinating thing. I really like this page in Draftsman Exam. All these faces here for a book that has a lot of cut and paste imagery where you expect repetition. This is all actually hand drawn, different little faces. There's minor little variations in them. And then I really like this question that Scott asked: why do draftsmen only observe the surface? I don't think that's entirely accurate, but if you're talking about strict like illustrative draftsmen, then yeah. And for Scott, that obviously someone who's looking more for the essence of something, that's a pretty potent question, and something that, as someone who's been a realist for a long time, who's now delving into cartooning and kind of essential representation, that's a pretty good question for me too. So as you can see, this is a really hard project to talk about in full. It's something I really have to sit with and go back over and over, and I think that's what Scott's inviting you to do, as he's like kind of going purposely introverted, trying to represent his interior state. He's asking you to go in and do this really deep self-examination of how you interpret all of his public symbols. So I think it's a really fascinating project. I think Scott is probably on like a lifelong project with this idea of developing symbols and training people in symbols. And yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting. Anyone where I can look at their work as like a totality, you know, and across different types of projects, like where Domesticated Afterlife is very much, you know, more drawn and rendered and has a narrative to it, to Travel Diary, which develops this cut and paste technique but didn't have any kind of dialogue or any kind of end for anyone else, kind of meeting in the middle. It's hard to divorce these three projects from each other, and I'm really curious for whatever comes next. Also, just like the amount of work that Scott's put into this. I mean, doing 21 of these little mini comics, and they're all packed full of different, even though he's cutting and pasting imagery, there's a lot of new imagery in each one. There's very few crossovers. So just someone who's up to something very different in comics, something very fascinating, something that I think comes from more of an art school, academic background. Bringing those ideas into comics is always very exciting to me. So I really, really enjoy what Scott's doing, and I really, really look forward to engaging with Scott more as we write these letters back and forth. I will keep you updated on how you all can have access to those. We'll figure that out at some point. But I think Scott's a really fascinating thinker, fascinating artist, and excited to know him and get to know him better. Hey there everybody, thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at 3 new books put out by Brian Canini. I'm always excited when I get a new package from Brian. He's always so kind to send along his new books. I love his cartooning. I especially love his writing. I just think he makes really fun, enjoyable comics. that don't push into any uncomfortable territory. I think these are very approachable comics for everyone. The first little book we got here is just like a little zine collection of portraits, and these are mostly famous cartoonists and people, but not all of them. We have like John Carpenter and stuff. So people who have been an influence to Brian. I particularly like the cover because it doesn't tell who anyone is, but it's like a little game where on the back we have the name of the artist. So going through and trying to guess who most of them are. Like Frank Miller was real obvious. There's Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane. So that was just a fun little project to look through. Then the two books that came with comics in it are Glimpses of Life #9. This is a collection of random autobio comics, and then Airbag #0, which is a zero issue for Brian's ongoing one-man anthology. We'll take a look at Glimpses of Life first. Most of these are little one-page stories, so I don't want to show all of them, but they're all quite funny. And for autobio comics, it's not like the obnoxious diary comic of a comic artist trying to make comics. This is someone who like lives a pretty normal life and is finding kind of like Harvey Pekar, where you're finding the little jokes or the little poetic moments in life. So a type of autobio comic that I can get into pretty easily. This first one cracked me up. He's talking about this gives you a sense of like the little moments that he's finding. The last sandcastle, and over the years I built many sandcastles, but when I was 9 I built my last, and he's building this huge awesome one that's got a moat and a bridge and really going into it. And then this little 3 or 4-year-old comes over and just straight up poops right in the moat, and it's like, that's it, I'm done, never building them again. So just little funny moments like that throughout life is what's represented in here. This one here, Bat Headlight, this is something that I totally agree with you on, Brian. Is it just me, or have people's headlights gotten brighter? Yeah, over time they have been getting brighter. Really obnoxious. Instead of the soft yellow, they're that bright like blue-white now. And they really hurt my eyes. One thing, Brian, I can tell you, if someone's up behind you, you can use your side view mirror to flash it back in their face. I've done that before, but road rage incident. So I don't know. I think that's part of like why I enjoy Brian's comics, is I feel like there's a lot of things like that where I just really relate to them. Like there was in another video recently, I had to say, "Damn you, Kanini," because he beat me to an idea. So I just feel like there's kind of a similar sense of humor and similar things that irk us, and it's just nice to encounter that. And then this one here is called Red Light, Green Light, and he's stuck at a light just worrying about what the world will be like when the kids grow up. And then here at the end, she says, "Dad, you have a green light. What are you waiting for?" And so this idea that your kids are like, maybe a little bit more competent than you and whatnot. So a lot of just like real simple one-page things. Brian's cartooning, you can see, is very straightforward. It gets the story across. I call it functional cartooning. It's not like any kind of super flashy image making or whatever, but it's also like it allows him to work fast and get his ideas out. And I really wish I could do that. Like I always have to spend so much time on a page. So when I call this the Rust Belt Review crew, because a lot of them, like Brian, have been in Rust Belt Review, and they all have that aesthetic to them. And they're all writers, and they're about getting their ideas out, and their cartooning is to tell a story, and I admire that quite a bit. So on to Airbag. The first story in this issue of Airbag is a really funny one where a guy starts growing a city on his hand, like a city starts evolving. And this is one of those typical, like city evolving overnight in your refrigerator type of stories, but it's happening on the guy's hand. So that's a pretty funny extra little bit that he has to deal with there. This one's about a crazy dining experience. It's called University Dining. And you can see here the type of dining experience. This meal will require you to purchase dinner menus. And this poor guy's like, "Oh my God, I can't afford this date." So just funny little scenarios like that. And Brian is a really like smart about comics too. He understands how pictures and words come together. So this story is a story about a woman going to Hollywood, obviously a young woman hoping to make it in Hollywood, and like the narrative on top and the writing and the images kind of cut against each other. It points to tell two different stories that cross and form each other. So here she's saying, oh, a producer even offered me a part recently, but you see he's basically just asking for a blowjob. But the script wasn't right for me, so I turned it down, and you see her macing him. That's comics right there. That's the writing that is like using the writing and the pictures together. I've been reading the old Prince Valiant stuff. I've been picking those up in the Fantagraphics, and like that kind of thing isn't comics to me. It's the art's beautiful, but the writing is not helping the imagery any and that kind of stuff. So I really appreciate artists like Brian who know how to use the two together. They really understand the medium. And then a bit of writing I like right here. This can't be all that life is. Does a lifetime really just amount to an ugly casket and a handful of people to mourn you? There's got to be more than this. And you see this guy basically contemplating his life and death. So within all the fun little jokes and stuff that Brian has, or the funny stories like with the city growing on a guy's hand, he's also able to delve into some really deep, serious topics and some questions on life that we all struggle with. And again, is always like the cartooning is just serving the story. It's comics at its peak, in my opinion. So really, really fun stuff. Highly recommend going out and getting yourself as much of Brian's work as you can and keeping up with everything he does. I get a couple new books I feel like every 6 months or so. So Brian's pretty prolific as well. So give him a look. And thank you, Brian. I really appreciate these. I'm always enjoying these. Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at Caravaggio, The Palette and the Sword, Book 1 by Milo Manara, put out by Fantagraphics. Always hesitant to buy a Milo Manara book because they're often too perverse and rapey for me, even though I love his art. But I took a gamble on this one because it's historical, and woo, did that pay off. Right out the gate, you see that Manara is firing on all guns. This is a master, truly, really leveraging every skill he has. Obviously is a huge fan of Caravaggio and taking this project very seriously. But right out the gate, I mean, come on, that's European comics at its best right there. People who can illustrate their ass off and do comics. So the story basically starts with people traveling to Rome, and Caravaggio's going with them. He wants to be a great painter, so he's going to Rome to study with the great painters. Again, you can see the artwork here. This is just European comics at its best. These amazingly detailed, researched, painted historical comics. Caravaggio gets introduced to the studio Cavaliere di Arpino, who's going to be like his maestro for a while. You see that Manara takes advantage of this to draw a bunch of naked ladies, but he's holding himself back from his normal. There's some where he's got girls bent over getting spanked and stuff, but this is nowhere near pornographic as a normal Manara book. He still has very kind of modern, thin idea of females. he has one way, he has a preference of how his women's bodies should look. But it's basically showing Caravaggio in the studio, also showing him staying late at night painting and becoming a master on his own. The suggestion is he's pretty much already better than everyone there, but needs to work his way up in the ranks. There's a fun scene here where Caravaggio, who's known to hang out with the Gentileschi, is here, and Gentileschi, they're going to see a public beheading, and Gentileschi's got his daughter Artemis. So if you know Artemis Gentileschi and her story, that's an interesting. She's definitely someone in the Caravaggio lane of painting who's become quite famous, and it's extra funny because they're relating it to the Judith and Holofernes painting, which Artemisia did arguably a better one than Caravaggio. compositionally at least, if not technique-wise. So showing that painting here, it's fun to see Manara doing his versions of those paintings, but they also have like the painting tipped in, and then you have Manara's version. So pretty cool to just suggest that they may have seen a beheading and that inspired his and was a memory of hers. I'm sure there's a lot of artistic license being taken in here. You also meet Peter Paul Rubens. There's this scene here that was considered like, this is the Mother Mary and people. Here we meet Peter Paul Rubens, another extremely famous painter. He's come in because Caravaggio has painted this painting, which the church wants to get rid of, and Rubens is saying, no, it's too good of a painting, like take it, I'll take it and I'll hide it so no one can see it. I'd never heard about that painting, so it was cool. I went and looked that up, which is always fun with these historical books. And then we end with the famous Caravaggio's fighter and a murderer, so basically setting up the drama for the next story. Caravaggio is a perfect person to pick because he lived a pretty rowdy life. There's a lot of prostitutes and fighting and murder and stuff, so it makes for an exciting, compelling book. But you can see all the way throughout the art is ridiculously nice, obviously inspired. And then in the back here you get basically reprints of all of the paintings that are in the book, so that you can come and look at them afterwards and see them. I won't say in their full glory, because Caravaggio is someone, you know, like this right here, it just goes to black. But if you see that in person, it has a depth to it that's not suggested by printed page because of what he does with glazes. But pretty good representations of his paintings here that give you a sense of what the images throughout the book should look like if you saw them in person. So a really, really cool book, not just because Manara's doing such great work, but because it has this historical value to it with all the artwork. It's kind of like getting a little Caravaggio a really nicely printed Caravaggio catalog, plus this awesome story. So really, really enjoyed this. I know volume 2 is coming out soon, and I really look forward to that. If I find anything different in that other than this, then maybe I'll do a video about that one as well. But either way, you should definitely go out and get this. If it's probably the only Milo Manara books I'll ever own, and I would suggest if you're someone who's hesitant about Manara for the same reasons I am, you should make this the one Manara book you own, because it's quite lovely. Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Finally, it's here. This is a book that I've been longing and desiring for I don't know how long, 2016, 17 maybe, that I read this as a scanlation online, and it became one of my favorite comics of all time. I think when Living the Line started, well, I know for a fact that one of my dreams when we did Strange Death and Sean decided to keep Living the Line going as a publishing company and not just do that as a one-off Kickstarter, I was hoping that Sean could get the rights to The Climber, because I just wanted to see this artwork present. Well, A, I just wanted to own the book, and it didn't seem like it was ever going to get made, and B, with the production job that Sean does and how intense the art in this gets as it goes on, I just really wanted to see that, and I wanted to see it in an oversized hardcover. Right now we've got it coming out from Viz in their like omnibus collection size, so 450-ish page books. If they ever re-release this in hardcover, they do the big oversized thing one day 10 years from now, I'll totally swap out, because like I said, this is one of my favorite comics of all time. So I'll be talking about each volume as it comes out. Y'all just expect that now, especially since this first volume, I think if people picked it up and looked at the art and read the story, they wouldn't understand why I'm putting this in my like top 3 comics of all time. It starts out as a pretty standard sports manga. I think when I read it, I hadn't read a lot of work like that, so it was very like exotic in its structure. Now that I've read more manga, I understand that the structure is a little more standard, and you know, starting with a kid in high school and he's getting introduced to a sports club and that kind of stuff. But so I was a little worried that on a reread, having more manga under my belt, I wasn't going to like it as much. But I'm still really, really connecting with it. And knowing where the story goes and where the art goes from here, I know that I'm going to be excited about it. So I'll talk more about that as we go. What excites me so much about this and what separates it out to me. But anyways, this is right here. This is Buntaro Mori. He's the main character. He's the new kid at school, kind of a typical setup there. He's like the dark, quiet outsider kid. And this character is very much the loner. And I think that's one of the, as a fairly hermity kind of introvert myself, one of the things I really related to in this book. Immediately, of course, he's got to meet like an inspiration kind of bully character. This is the Miyamoto character. And you'll see here there's some more standard like manga exaggerated faces and stuff like that. I think Shinichi Sakamoto starts off as a really good but standard manga artist, someone who's willing to put in a lot of work but hasn't quite separated himself from the crowd yet. But this Buntaro character, Mori, is meeting Miyamoto. Miyamoto is a really, really good climber already. You can see that he's climbed the side of the school building here, and basically challenges Buntaro Mori to climb up the side of the building. And that is this big sequence here where he climbs up the side of the school building and almost dies, and finds his love for climbing. And I really love this shot here, taking that manga extreme foreshortening and the focus on the hands, like for the climber. I think there's beautiful drawings of hands all throughout because that's such a big part of the sport. But this is the moment that Buntaro Mori really finds that excitement of like, look, yes, I want to be a climber. I think one of the things that sets this out from a lot of other sports manga that I've read, or a lot of manga in general, is a lot of those, they set out to become the best. Like here you could see, I'm gonna climb this route that no one's ever climbed before. I'm gonna be the best ninja. I'm gonna be the strongest fighter, any of that kind of stuff. And there is a component of that in here. But ultimately, Buntaro's driven more by his desire to be alone and the kind of introvert's mental challenge of climbing something like this is appealing to him. And that's what really struck me. And then within that, like that desire to be alone, he does want to become the best. He does want to become a master of his craft. And that's one of the things that's so special to me about this book, is you go from pretty quickly, some fairly standard looking manga like this to some pretty exceptional imagery like this. And that only continues over the course of the series, where Shinichi Sakamoto goes from being a really good manga artist to one of the best ever. And you don't necessarily get that full growth by the end of this volume. When I was thinking about like, oh my God, if we could get the license for this, that would be so cool. I was wondering though, how would you promote this? You couldn't do it one small tankobon at a time, because by the end of volume 1, even though it's a good, compelling story, and when I read it online, I blew through it all in like one night, even from the starting point, I feel like people wouldn't get a full look at how good the art gets. And even by the end of this volume, where the art really is starting to get like really, really impressive, there's still a lot of room to go for Shinichi Sakamoto in terms of his skill set. So in the same way that the character is constantly leveling up his abilities as a mountain climber and becoming a true master, like Shinichi Sakamoto uses this book as his own ascent up the mountain to masterhood. And that's built into the story as well. And I'll point out some quotes and things that suggest, that was always just my assumption of what the story was about, but there's some quotes in here that back that up. But yeah, beautiful imagery like this. At this point, this is all hand done as well. This is all analog. I know starting with Innocent, Shinichi Sakamoto moved over to digital art, but this is all hand-drawn, hand-toned stuff. So fascinating, gorgeous imagery. There's not even that much that looks like adjusted photos in here. There's a little bit of it, but not a lot. So, of course, there's a young teacher who finds out that Buntaro is doing this stuff and kind of doing it dangerously, trying to basically solo climb mountains without a rope or anything. Here's another really good example of hand drawing and how beat up the hands get, how important the hands are in the story. But yeah, you can see him here solo climbing. So this teacher's like, no way, you don't have the right tools. We got to do this. I'll buy you some shoes if you take part in a competition. So using that to get the character engaged with the climbing club that they're trying to put together. So Buntaro does join the competition and is doing very well, but he's kind of a rule breaker, so he unclasps himself from the rope. He finds the rope is inhibiting him from climbing and gets disqualified from the competition, but shows that he's like this kind of prodigy level talent that gets everyone paying attention to him. And in this sequence here, there's some really beautiful imagery. One of the things I like quite a bit about Shinichi Sakamoto is he's willing to go into the character's mind with his drawings. Like here, he's not actually climbing this wall, he's climbing this wall, but in his mind he's imagining this other wall that he's climbing. And that gets more extreme as the series goes on as well, this interior kind of psychedelic imagery. A third character comes in, Keito Hara. This is another climber character. You can see him hanging upside down the building, watching the competition on the inside. So someone else who's going to be important in Mori's life and inspiring him to become a solo climber. Here Mori has encountered an older person who's giving him some advice, and he says, "Solo climbing always means death. No one is there to help you, so you die alone. Always keep your rope. People need each other to survive." And that's just I think some really nice writing and straight to the thematics of it. Like, look, you may be a loner, but if you take this too far, you're going to die alone. And people need each other. And that idea of always keep your rope, like always have other people around, always have a support system. And that's going to be a struggle for Mori throughout the book. And it's something that I relate to, as someone who's a pretty intense loner, but also desires human connection. Like I burn out around people really quick, but I still desire that connection. And the push and pull between someone who wants to be alone out in the middle of the woods, out in the middle of a gigantic mountain range, but also who wants to have friends and have a love life and things like that. It can be very difficult, and that's a theme in the book that I associated. And then the real theme of the book is this: climb higher and find a new you. And it takes away that that thing of being the best that I see in a lot of manga. Like, I'm going to be the best ninja, I'm going to be the best fighter, I'm going to be the best whatever. This one takes what I think is really truly the artist's route, the artist's path up the mountain, which is like the hardest path you can find. And you're taking the hardest path because you're looking for the new highest you. And to me, that's always what art has, since I was 17 or 18, what art has been about for me. Not just doing something cool, fun, trying to make money at it, but it's for me first. I'm trying to find new things about myself, figure out new things about the world, and always climb higher, never get stagnant. And so that's the theme in this book that I relate to. And then that theme is so thoroughly saturating the book that Shinichi Sakamoto literally goes on that journey in the art, and you can watch him become a master artist. And already within this first volume, you're getting some imagery like this. I know I've done some reviews of Summit of the Gods by Jiro Taniguchi, and as much as I love Taniguchi's art and his representations of nature, and I think he's this amazing background artist, I don't think that Summit of the Gods can beat The Climber. I think, and I know Shinichi Sakamoto would probably hate that, because I'm pretty sure I've read here and there that he's inspired by Summit of the Gods. But having read both of these, I think the art's more astonishing in this one, and I connected with the story more as well, even though they both deal with kind of the same topics. But some of the scenery in here that you get, and we'll see more as I talk about further volumes, but just absolute staggering, like, scenes that have so much space and depth in them and really give you a sense of being out on the mountain. I have no idea how him and his team sourced all the reference photos for this, but again, you can see this is not an adjusted photograph. This is all hand drawn. They're obviously drawing on top of a photograph or have a reference, but this is all hand done. You start to learn later in the volume 2 why Maury is such a loner, that like multiple times throughout his life he's tried to get involved in things and they've gone bad. So he says, everything I touch turns to shit. It's always been that way. And then he just kind of decides, like, it would be better for me to just be alone. So there's not just like the character set up as a loner, there's also some motivation for that, some backstory for that that gets deeper as the book goes. Then these volumes are extra cool because instead of having interviews with the artists, they delve into climbing culture. They have some interviews with some climbers in here, which I think is really cool, rounding out the information. And like, I'm not brave enough or strong enough to go climbing, but it's always something that fascinated me. And I do love climbing up small bits of rock and hiking and all that stuff. So it's a really tempting world to get involved in, but also, you know, reading these books and reading these interviews, you realize how tough and brave people got to be. And that's never going to be me. Same with scuba diving. I'd love to go scuba diving, but I don't know if I'll ever do it. And then in the end, we get 2 quotes from Shinichi Sakamoto that basically speak to what I assumed was the theme of the book. The first one is, when I read the novel this manga is based on, I admired Buntaro Kato, the main character. The way he lived his life really resonated with me. Mountains aren't an easy topic to tackle, but I wanted to be strong and determined like Buntaro as I advanced step by step towards the top. And that's where he's saying, like, I tried to be strong and I'm advancing step by step. And then once you start a climb, you can't abandon it. I think mountains and manga are similar in that way. Those were my thoughts as I faced a small 60 centimeter by 90 centimeter desk. So very much talking about the process of making this manga in the metaphorical terms of climbing mountains. And that's what I felt in it, reading it the first time through so deeply, is that I watched someone climb their own personal mountain towards masterhood, true mastery of their medium and their abilities. And so that's what's so special about this book. You could start to get a sense of it in some of the background work. I don't think the character work in this volume is quite there yet. It gets way better as it goes. Less stylized and more up into Shinichi's own kind of approach to things. But even within this first volume, you're just chock full of beautiful imagery, stunning drawing, and then really, really good storytelling. But yeah, some of this exaggerated like fight manga stuff goes away as the series goes on. So I know and that's why I was like, man, I don't know how they're ever gonna sell this, because you got to get into some of the later, like probably the next volume is where it'll really start taking off in the art. And being something not like an adventure manga, I see why they started with Innocent and hashtag DRCL to get something that would be like a little more popular, you know, heads getting cut off and floofy French Victorian dresses and Dracula and that kind of stuff. And then once you got the audience committed to the artist, then you release this book, because the premise of like a guy climbing and the slower start to the art, I think, would have led to less sales on this book if this had been the first one to come out. So smart, but I've been waiting eagerly, and I'm glad it's finally here. And really, like, as good as this volume is, like, I cannot encourage you guys enough to grab this one, read it, and then keep going with the series, because it just keeps getting better and better and better till by the end it's one of the most astonishing things you've seen. But I can't be more excited. I can't be more grateful that Viz is finally putting this out. I've been talking about this for so long that as soon as it came in, I opened the book and opened my package and showed it to Tori, and she went, "Yee, finally!" Like, she knows I've been looking forward to it that much. So yeah, one of my favorite, probably top 3 comics of all time. I will see how it holds up on a reread, but so far it's doing pretty good. So I'm excited. I can't wait for the rest of them, and I hope you all get a chance to enjoy this as well. Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I've got a pretty special book. This is Paul Auster's The New York Trilogy. This is put out by Pantheon. And it's taking what I'm assuming are three famous books by a man named Paul Auster and having them illustrated by three really famous comic art. Actually, I don't know the third one, Karaski, but the other two are Lorenzo Matodi and Dave Mazzucchelli. Dave Mazzucchelli kicks the book off, and if you know anything about Dave Mazzucchelli's career, you've probably read this already. This is City of Glass by Paul Auster. I didn't know that this book had two other books that went with it, so it's really cool to have this all in one collection. I don't know if the Matodi one's been hanging around and the third one, the Karaski one, has been added and they've all been collected, or if the other two have been commissioned specifically for this volume. I'm not sure. I wish there had been like an essay in here that gave a little more context about the books, because the books are also very strange as a project. I don't know if people are familiar with it, but they're all pretty similar, like these detective stories, someone looking for someone else and like getting too far into the search and then losing their own life, basically falling apart over the obsession. And there's some links between at least the visuals in these. I don't know if there's links between the three books or not. I'll talk about some of that as I go. So it's a pretty confusing but compelling project. And I think the like nesting egg, and it almost feels like a Russian nesting doll that loops back onto the biggest one in some way. I feel like people could get obsessed with this book in the same way that the characters are getting obsessed with their own stories within it. So a little bit of context would have helped, but I feel like it's purposeful that they didn't give any context because they want you to be obsessed with this in the way that Paul Auster, if Paul Auster is a real person, is obsessed with it. So the reason I say Paul Auster is a real person is there's a lot of layers of people pretending to be other people, or people writing stories with themselves in it under a different name, that kind of stuff. Like here we have a guy named Daniel Quinn who's a writer. He writes Mac's work and he writes this character named Mac's work, but then he starts pretending to be him, but then someone's also confusing him for Paul Auster, and I don't know, William Wilson remain an abstract figure. There's a lot of like layers of people pretending to be people. Anyways, this is Mazzucchelli's one, The City of Glass. This is, to me, a classic page here. I use this page when I teach comics, actually. I've done like some workshops and I've done a couple of summer courses on comics, and this is one of mine that I use to show the necessity when images and words go together perfectly and cross-inform each other. So on this page, if you didn't have the sound effect, it could look like the guy finished taking his shit and went and called someone, but when you have the sound effect, you know that he's getting up to answer the phone and then missing it. So kind of like a thing that could only be done in comics. You have to have both the words and the images. If you just had the ringing, it wouldn't make any sense. So I use that one a lot. Yeah, to me, it's a really classic Dave Mazzucchelli, like comics at its purest type of thing. The job in this one is he's being asked to find this character, Peter Stillman, and not find him, but watch him carefully and find out what he's up to. So these are all like hard-boiled detective stories, and you can see here, this is a writer, the Quinn guy, and he's like, well, I'm not really a detective, but he's going to pretend to be the detective since he writes these detective books. But also, while he's pretending to be his own detective, this woman's mistaking him for Paul Auster, who's the author of the book. So there's kind of this insertion of the author into the story, trying to make it real, like crossing the boundary between reality and fiction. And in these stories, it never resolves in a way that I'm totally sure about what it is. This story here, the Peter Stillman character has a theory of language based on the Tower of Babel, and so the Tower of Babel becomes a thematically important thing throughout the City of Glass. And then this is one of those things that shows up in the third book, but it's not really part of the writing, it's part of the imagery. So I don't know if the books contain crossover between that theme, or if that's just something that the artists put into it. I'm not sure, but it's an important part of the first and third story in this book. Here's the Peter Stillman character, and he's talking to the Quinn character, the detective, the fake Paul Auster, here about his theory of language. And then here you get the writer actually entering the book, where the Quinn character, who's a character written by Paul Auster, who's writing a book about the Max character, actually meets Paul Auster, and Paul Auster really quickly like lets him in. And then you see here Paul Auster is writing like Quinn told him the whole story. So kind of like a stranger than fiction thing where the character gets to meet the writer, but there's not like a clear resolution to that whole kind of storyline. So that provides the structure that's similar for the other two, where there's a person like on a stakeout asked to watch somebody, and they delve in. Eventually in this one, the Quinn character, like the characters in the other books, delves in too far and becomes homeless and loses his whole life. And that seems to be the theme through all three stories, is like this detective having an obsession and then that ruining his own life. So that theme repeats. Then we go to the second story, and the reason I bought this collected volume, I already had the City of Glass one, but this has Lorenzo Matodi in it. So I'm a huge fan of Lorenzo Matodi, as much or maybe even more than Dave Mazzucchelli, so I had to get this, and this is Ghosts by Paul Auster, so the second of the three. This one is seemingly divorced from the other two in that it doesn't have any of the same characters, or at least not referred to by name. Everyone in this one's referred to by a color, so white, black, brown, and basically this character Black comes in and hires this character Blue to, actually this is White, and White is hiring Blue to, stalk and watch Black and report what Black is up to. You can see this one is less like a comic and more like an illustrated book. Normally, I'm not too into that format, but I'm getting some awesome Lorenzo Matodi illustrations, so I don't really mind. Matodi's someone that I'm studying obsessively right now. I think his cartooning and his use of shape is amazing. You can see how powerful of an illustrator he is. With this image here, adding to what's going on in the story. Like as this guy Blue accepts the job from White, he's kind of getting pulled into his own doom. That's not really suggested too much in the text, but Matodi knows where the story's going, obviously, and is able to produce this illustration where like there's this metaphorical trapdoor. The guy's not really falling into it, but it's a metaphorical trapdoor right there. So I think that's a really lovely use of still combining images and words, but in a different way than normal in comics. I shouldn't say a different way than normal, but like the relationship between the text being down here and the image up here is different than normal in comics. We do have some scenes that look more like comics, and there are scenes where there's word balloons and things like that. So it's not only in this format, but the majority of it's like this. So that story there, yeah, there's really not much to talk about other than that this character Blue has just sat there watching this character Black write a book, and it kind of has that same loop where the character's getting drawn in. There may be some relations if I went back, and now that I've reread them all, reread the other ones where Blue and Black and White relate to other characters in the book, but I don't think so. The story's a little bit different. You see here there are some pages with word balloons too, but a real masterclass in illustration by Matodi and a really fascinating story by Paul Auster. So really, really glad I got that. It's real fun to see Matodi work in an in-between of like his black and white pen and ink style, which is very line-based and scratchy, and his pastel style, which is much more like this. So to see him working in black and white, but with like a grease crayon or a big thick, like, you know, ebony pencil or some whatever he's using for this, I think is a nice in between his pen and ink style and his painting color style that helps link the two together. It's always fun to see how different medium force the artist into different approach as well. And I feel like Matodi is someone who, even though he's very consistent in his, well, not even consistent in his compositions can change. These feel more like his color pencil compositions, and his pen and ink compositions can feel quite different than this. So interesting to see how material switches how an artist works. And then the last one is written and illustrated by the same person who adapted this one for Matodi. This is Paul Karaski doing The Locked Room. And this one I'm a little bit surprised, like, because the art just isn't at, even though the comic is great, the art isn't at that same like master level as, in my opinion, as Matodi and Mazzucchelli. So it feels a little bit weird, especially since it's the last one. You've got these two really intensely beautiful images, and then set of images throughout the first two stories, and then here you have someone who's good, but they're like a pretty standard cartoonist in my opinion. There are some interesting things going on formally with the story which make it really interesting, like here where the book is turned and being open, and then you get like this weird little cutout figure here using the letters. So there's a lot of visual tricks like that, and then the character reaching in and getting the letter that make this a pretty compelling read. And then the story is very compelling. And this one links back to City of Glass in that a lot of the characters are the same. So here we have Sophie Fanshawe. Her husband is a writer who's supposedly dead. And this is an old friend of theirs that's being asked over again to help find or figure out what's going on with the husband. She mentions, the wife here, Sophie, mentions that she went to a detective named Quinn and asked them to find Fanshawe and wasn't able to, so she's assumed that her husband is dead, and she's asking this friend now to help take his writing and help her husband's writing blow up. He has some connection to the literary world, and then he gets involved in this, like, where is he, what happened to him kind of quest on his own. I noticed here there's a Tower of Babel in the background, so this is one of those things where I feel like this third one, the artist has read the previous two adaptations and is doing some visual resonances with them that maybe aren't in the original book, but maybe the original book describes her having a Tower of Babel on the wall. I'm not sure. So there's some confusion for me, and that may be intentional between the three, since Paul Auster's obviously trying to create some confusion. That may be something the artists are doing on purpose to make the three even more related, but it seems like the stories are related with the Quinn. Really enjoy this bit of production here, a real smart decision. And this is where I'm saying, even though the drawing to me doesn't stand out in the way that Matodi and Mazzucchelli's does, some of the cool stuff going on with the comics does. Right here, to have this like visual effect put on the spine, like separating and linking these people. The effect, if it just went to white on a straight piece of paper, wouldn't be as intense, but with the fold in between, it creates like this strange optical glow, like the fading to white and then the actual shadow in the middle. It creates a really, really weird, and I don't know if it'll come across on screen, but a real glowing optical effect in that rift between them that I think is very smart use of the book format. This story deals a little bit with someone trying to take someone else's identity in life, which is a theme in, the Quinn guy taking on the Auster and also pretending to be his own detective. That seems to be a theme of like people losing themselves in other people's lives. So now this friend that's helping the ex-wife, the widow, blow up her husband's literature career and make a lot of money off that. They start sleeping together, so he's sleeping with his friend's old wife. He gets a letter from his friend who's supposed to be dead, basically giving him permission, like, hey, take care of my wife. I decided to leave my life. This is fine. Like, good job. Don't try and find me, but thanks for getting my story out there. My story's out there. So it's a weird thing, but then, of course, the character wants to go find him. Peter Stillman from the first story shows up in this as well. So here, this character's pretending to be Fanshawe, and he's talking to Peter Stillman to further mix up the City of Glass and this story. And then there's a character named Henry Dark, which is referenced to in here, which is also referenced in the first book. So this is one that probably has like a kaleidoscope type structure where once you've read it all the way through, if you read it 2 or 3 more times, you'd start to find even more links. I'm sure there's probably even more visual links between the first and the third story. I didn't see much in the Matoti section that seemed to relate to the other stories visually or in writing, but I could be wrong. There could just be stuff I was missing because I didn't have the other, I hadn't read the whole thing yet. But with the black and white and blue and all the colors, it just doesn't seem to be as related to the other two. So a fascinating project. I get why the Paul Auster books are as popular enough, and why that would be an interesting challenge for cartoonists, comic artists of this level caliber to take on such a challenging, seems like probably untranslatable type of book. You can't do it in another medium. How do we do that? And it comes off very, very well. It's really, really nice. I don't know how I'm gonna put them on my shelves now though, because do I put it with my Mazzucchelli books or do I put it with my Matoti books? We'll find out. But it's really cool to have this all under one cover and have a nice new pristine printing of Paul Auster's City of Glass by Mazzucchelli. I had this in like a beat up old edition. So really, really enjoy this book. Masterful by everyone involved and quite a beautiful thing. Hey there everybody, thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I've got a book I'm very excited about, just came out from Fantagraphics, called Goes Like This by Jordan Crane. Huge fan of Jordan Crane's work. Came to him a little too late, but this is helping me out by collecting some of his older short stories into one gorgeous package. You can see on the side it's got a very strange binding without I've got a couple books like this that don't have a spine on it, and the reason for that is this book is chock full of different kinds of papers, inks, production techniques, and stuff like that. Jordan Crane is someone who brought production concerns to comics. Like I said, this is someone I came to very late in the game, only a couple years ago, but the more I've learned about him, I know that he was big in bringing production to comics. So there's a lot of beautiful production stuff in here that's very inspiring to me as someone who's also become obsessed with that, including the covers. They have like a spot gloss on them, and the way that the spot gloss is put on really makes it look like it's been printed in layers of spot gloss. I don't think that's actually what happened. It's something I'd love to see. I don't know if you can print spot gloss on top of spot gloss, but the way that he's done it here almost looks like it's got color and then spot gloss and then color and then spot gloss. It looks layered like a painting, which is something I really, really want to try within my own comics. Because of my background as a painter, there's layering effects with color that you can't get just straight mixing. And Jordan Crane seems very interested in that. I think a lot of times he's just using layers in Photoshop, but the way he's doing it winds up making it look like a screen print, even if it's just offset lithography. And the way he's manipulating the spot gloss, choosing what lines it goes over, what shapes it doesn't, is all very clever. Then immediately you get a different type of paper here, a very thin paper, and this is printed with 2 spot colors like the cyan and a red, and so you've got those type of ink mixtures there. I think it's anytime you've got color showing through color, it's really beautiful. Then we come back to like the cover material, and there's a lot of these pinup pages throughout. These ones are again printed on this really thick paper, and it almost looks like layers of gloss, but it could just be how the color's used. I think Jordan Crane's very obviously interested in transparency as one of the formal kind of elements of art. That's one that gets left out a lot. Color, line, all those things. Transparency is one that I think is more recently added to people's considerations of that, and Jordan Crane seems really interested in that. Then there's a lot of short stories in here. This one you can see is like on a shiny paper. and it's a full color story. I really like the switch between the colors throughout the story. There's like different monochromatic palettes throughout. I'm not sure if this is like one, it looks like it might be spot colors plus gray, plus black. Like this might all be, no, I guess that's blue and green, but it might just be blue with the gray greening things down. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure if he's doing tricks on every one of these things, but it seems like there might be a limited color palette going on here plus gray. But a really funny story. The short stories are all kind of just jokey almost. This one's called The Hand of Gold. And it's about a guy that steals some gold, and here he's in a cave and accidentally shooting himself. This one called Keep a Light Out. This is what makes me think he might be doing some color mixing tricks on some of these other ones, and just knowing he's a production guy. But this one's very obviously this dark blue or purple with the magenta, and then the way they overlap to create a third color. This seems entirely like a formal experiment, just playing with that printmaking technique. But really beautiful imagery throughout. And again, like the type of printmaking techniques that I'm becoming interested in, so very inspiring. Then we switch to another signature that's got like this kind of yellowy, very fibrous, non-coated paper here, and just a black and white story called Below the Shade of Night. Beautiful cartooning throughout, very Sammy Harcum, Sean Knickerbocker, those are probably both people that are inspired by Jordan Crane, I would imagine. Maybe Jordan Crane inspired by Jordan Crane inspired by Sammy Harcum. I'm not sure about the timeline on that. This is a story before they got better. A few of these stories are more just like down to earth. This is just a family. It seems like a lot of the stories, including I'm gonna forget the name of that awesome book that he did. His last graphic novel that just came out with the car crash seems to have these very domestic kind of stories. So someone who's, I'm assuming a parent, like here you have this guy going down in his man cave to get away from the wife and the kid. So a lot of Jordan Crane stories seem to have that very domestic nature to them. Then whether it's on shiny paper or whether it's on this uncoated matte paper, there's a lot of these illustrations in here that again seem to be taking advantage of. I don't think they're actually using spot colors in here, but a lot of the idea of screening colors over top of each other, I'm pretty sure that's all just done in Photoshop, manipulating where they're multiplied and where they're screened and that type of stuff. But it winds up looking kind of like a spot color job. I don't think it is. I don't think we could do a spot color like this right here could be, but I think it's just a CMYK mix because you can't do it unique for every page like that. But some really beautiful imagery that shows this kind of idea of playing with transparency, knocking out lines that Jordan Crane's playing with, especially on the covers, playing with those transparencies. Then there's a two-part story called Vicissitude here, another one that's like a black and white, but this is on a whiter uncoated paper. And again, a story about like some domestic stuff and a wife that's cheating or a partner that's cheating on somebody. And then in between each of these, you get some more of these illustrations, a lot of which deal with the transparencies. Then you get this piece here, which is printed on like, it's either printed with pink or it's got like kind of a pinkish paper. This is a short little surreal one that kind of loops in on itself called Wake Up, about a woman murdering herself. And then we go to another color one on shiny paper. This is a sci-fi story. I think this one I got an Uptight number 5. I don't know how many of these come out of Uptight. I still need to see if I can find all what was in Uptight. But this is a sci-fi story where they land on a comet and they're trying to mine it and it goes wrong. I really like Jordan Crane when he starts getting all these bubbly things all over the place. This is the person's hands got cut off and is bleeding. You can see that here, which is the cover to Uptight number 5, though. All of these like transparent bubbles that go over stuff color-wise. Then a short siren story called The Middle of Nothing, or sorry, The Middle of Nowhere. Some real good use of tones in this one, dot tones. And then a story called Now. I think Now is a children's book that Jordan Crane released, and I think this is being represented here by showing the cover of the book and then opening the page. So I think he's collected a whole children's book just into this one comic, but I'm not sure because it gets stretched out here in a way that wouldn't really fit in a kid's book. And then this last story here is quite beautiful as well. And this has those little bubbly things that I've seen Jordan Crane do before. And just absolutely beautiful colors throughout. I'm sorry I'm giving away so much here, but I really, really love the way these colors look. And these are some of the kind of effects he did in his graphic novel as well. So really a distinct personal cartooning style throughout. Someone who has a lot of different ideas within that distinct personal style of how to put it all together in the final product. And yeah, a really unique book, a really interesting piece of production, a lot of enjoyable stories, and a real masterclass, I think, in how sexy books can be. So definitely go out and get yourself Goes Like This. And if you haven't, get any other Jordan Crane material you can, because it's all phenomenal.